A diary found in an abandoned bomb shelter. Record 1. We were brought here by the military. Me, 2 men, and 1 woman. I was in no condition to resist. Any attempts to break free were suppressed by a horse dose of the psychotropic drug I had been dosed with at the clinic. We were immediately placed in rooms which were equipped as solitary cells, where the only source of light was a dim red bulb, securely covered by a steel-grated lampshade. There were no windows in the cell. The gray concrete walls were roughly finished and damp and depressing. The heavy steel door, painted dark green, was despairing. In the left corner, relative to the door, stood a metal bed with legs bolted to the floor. To the right, a rusty toilet bowl paled in color. There was no sink, no table, and no other modest household items in the cell. I was dragged carelessly in and thrown to the floor. The door slammed shut, and I was left alone. I lay still for a long time, listening to my own wheezing breath. I was unable to imagine why I had been brought here, or what they were going to do to me and the others. I shuddered, feeling an indescribable primal fear. Any attempt to think logically collapsed under the influence of the powerful drug. And every clearing of consciousness was accompanied by a sharp headache. I seemed to spend an eternity like that before I regained consciousness. I felt like a wild animal trapped in a cage. There were traces of dried blood on my hospital clothes. My skin was covered in abrasions and bruises. I tried to get to my feet several times, but my body wouldn't listen to me. Again and again I fell to the cold and musty-smelling floor. My mouth gave a low moan, and tears of despair rolled from my eyes. Finally, I found the strength to get up and crawl to the bed. When I collapsed on it and felt the soft mattress under me, though damp, I passed out instantly. I had unbearable nightmares for a long time, and I must have screamed in my sleep. When I finally woke up, all my clothes were wet with sweat. I had long ago lost track of time within these walls. My internal clock had stopped the moment the door slammed shut behind me. Under the mattress, I found a small old notebook and a scrap of pencil, which helped me make this entry. I decided to write down everything that would happen to me, hoping that it would go some way to helping me figure out what this place was and why I was here. Recording 2. I was once a patient at a closed psychiatric clinic for the hopelessly ill. The clinic was located in the suburbs and was hidden from view by a small, thorny spruce forest. Here I was persistently treated for the obsessive hallucinations that had plagued me since childhood. Here they took all the lunatics who were suddenly considered dangerous by society for various reasons. I was one of those dangerous. I was placed here after I had brutally murdered my mother in a severe hallucinatory delirium and then dismembered her body. That was the claim of the police, who arrived to the commotion and found me at the scene of the elaborate murder. I myself still do not remember anything from that horrible evening. Later, a forensic psychiatric examination declared me insane and committed me to this clinic. Here I was given all kinds of drugs, and at night I was tied to the bed. Never tried to resist, knowing full well that I was seriously ill. What I feared more than anything was that I might do something horrible again when I lost control. The medication was clearly doing me good. The hallucinations had all but stopped. My mind was slowly regaining consciousness. I was allowed rare walks around the grounds, during which I sometimes even managed to exchange a few words with some of the medical staff. I stayed in the clinic for about a year. One night, 2 sturdy orderlies came into my room. They woke me up and ordered me to go with them to the office of the chief physician. One of them took out a 3-edged key and opened the door leading to the stairwell. We went upstairs, where there were several other doors, and entered one of them. This was the office, but the head doctor was not in it. Instead, I was met by 4 armed men in military uniforms. Their faces were hidden by balaclavas. The orderlies forcibly put me down on a chair and, without saying a word, left. I was confused by what was happening and simply could not string a few words together. One of the soldiers came up to me and started shining something red in my face. The other two immediately grabbed my arms. I jerked in an unsuccessful attempt to break free. Their trained steel grip held me like a vise. The fourth soldier approached me from behind and with a sharp blow plunged a syringe into my neck. The needle hit the carotid artery. At the same moment, the whole world spun around me, and I lost consciousness. Delirious, intrusive dreams enveloped my exhausted brain. I woke up in the back of a truck filled with phosphorescent reddish mist. There were 3 other bodies lying next to me, 2 men and a woman. They were wearing the same hospital clothes as me. They were all unconscious. They had probably been injected too. The van shuddered and rocked. I could hear the engine running dynamically. We were being driven somewhere. I'd looked around for a long time, trying to make sense of it. Then my mind went blank again, and the next events came back to me like a dream. The open doors of the van, a sharp red spotlight shining directly into my eyes. The soldiers pull us out. They clasp my hands and lead me down long corridors. Next is the open cell door and a painful fall to the floor. During all this time, the military did not utter a single word. I heard no commands or orders. They were definitely acting according to one well-coordinated, practiced scheme. An icy terror grips me. This place seems unreal. It's like the nightmare of a maniac mad with murder and blood. Recording 3. I thought the glow of the red light bulb above the door intensified. Now when I get out of bed, my body casts an ominous shadow. I wonder how long I've been here. A day or 2. I'm terribly thirsty. Sometimes I hear a strange man-made hum, like a giant engine running. It's coming from somewhere below. When it happens, the floor vibrates faintly. After a while it subsides. Then it happens again. The thought slips through my mind that perhaps I have died and am now in some kind of purgatory. But rare flashes of lucidity drove that delusion away from me. I must calm down and get some sleep. Entry 4. I have just experienced one of the most unspeakably monstrous hallucinations of my life. Was awakened by an incomprehensible noise. It was coming from the door. There was a desperate scrabbling on the outside, pounding with 1,000 tiny paws. I listened. It didn't stop. On the contrary, the door wasn't just scraping anymore. It was almost drumming. Something was pounding and scratching at the dilapidated paint with thin claws. A nasty chill ran down my spine. I huddled in the corner of the bed, terrified, and kept my eyes on the door, listening, trying to understand at least the nature of the inhuman sounds. Meanwhile, the light of the red lamp grew brighter. It quickly filled the space and became so bright that it was impossible to stay with my eyes open. Closing my eyes, I trembled with fear. The blows on the door became more and more violent and insistent. It felt like it was being battered down with a battering ram. Even the blank concrete walls shook in time with them. The technogenic hum I mentioned earlier also intensified. Now it was louder than ever, like the roar of some alien monster. All that blinding red cacophony was sinking its fangs into the gray mass of my tortured brain like a rabid beast. Sound and light intertwined in an ugly coitus, producing something that was completely beyond the limits of our normal conceptions of life. Something that could only be felt with a hidden sixth sense, when the whole body was paralyzed by an inexplicable terror that stole in from the depths of the otherworldly universe. My fear turned to despair. Unable to bear it any longer, I let out a shriek, a long, long scream. At the same second, everything went silent. Deafening silence swallowed up the sounds. The light faded to nothing. I wrapped my arms around my head and, sobbing, froze in place. Everything disappeared as suddenly as it had appeared. I could still see the acrid glare in front of my eyes, as if I'd been staring at the welding for a long time. My ears buzzed with the rush of blood, and my body shook with tremors and spasms. Suddenly, I was overcome by an unbearable feeling of vomiting. I drew to the side and let out a powerful stream of bitter vomit. Immediately, a new wave of fear, now joined by disgust, curbed me. I saw a huge white centipede swarming in the slurry of my vomit. Recording 5. I was lying on the floor when they suddenly opened the door. The creaking of the lock, the turning of the key. I heard nothing of the sort. There were 4 of them again, and their faces were still hidden by balaclavas. I recognized them at once. It was the same 4 that had picked me up from the clinic. It's hard to mistake them for anyone else. Same height, angular body movements. Even the stains on their camouflage were in the same places. Like they'd been printed on a printer. They looked like soldiers from old video games. I decided then that they must be some sort of personalized convoy of mine. Just like last time, they blinded my face with a red glow. They then walked over to me, threw me to the floor, and forcefully ripped off my hospital pajamas. When I noticed that the military man was holding a thin scalpel, I screamed and started to break free. There was an immediate scramble. I wriggled as best I could, cursing them with all the curses I could muster. They were silent as they tried to grab my limbs, in agony. I clutched one of them in the head and pulled off his balaclava. When I saw his face, I was paralyzed with horror. Even a second of what I saw was enough to realize that it wasn't human. A completely white, slippery head and face with no curves or hair. It had no ears, nose, or lips either. Only small, black, shiny eyes stared fixedly at me. A strip of mouth opened randomly, exposing small, pointed teeth. I was stunned for a second. Then I twisted around and grabbed the hand that held the scalpel. So I tried to snatch the medical instrument. I yanked my hand so hard that I tore it off. Now my fear had no limit. I held the plastic mannequin arm with the scalpel in my fist, with the empty sleeve of my army jacket dangling from the top. This just can't be. I thought in those eerie moments, this must be just another hallucination. My brain refused to realize the obvious. But then the creatures started kicking me, and I felt a very real pain. I shrugged off the prosthetic arm and shoved the non-humans away from me, and suddenly I was able to get to my feet. When I saw the door open, I rushed for the exit, leaving the unbearable horror behind me. Ran down the long, unlit hallway, exhausted and dehydrated. My legs were shaking. I stumbled and fell more than once. Then I got up again and continued my escape with all my might. There was a light at the end of the corridor. A red and warm light. I had no idea what awaited me there. Apparently succumbing to my ancient instincts, unconsciously ran toward the source of the light. As I got closer, I realized that it was just another cell, where someone had obviously been captured as well. The exact same cell as the one I was being held in. The door was open, its light flooding part of the hallway. I hesitantly stepped inside. In the corner, I saw a body sprawled on the bed. I walked over to it. It was a man, one of the men I had been brought here with. The man was dead. On his face I saw the first signs of decomposition. He had died with his eyes open, in which frozen shone an unspeakable horror. In his mouth I noticed a faint movement. His lips parted, and a hideously slippery centipede appeared. It crawled out quickly, arcing around the left side of his face and disappearing into the back of his head. Recoiled in disgust. Only now did I notice that his whole body was crawling with them. Centipedes crawled up his arms, crawled under his clothes, and wriggled out into the light. They were falling off the bed, continuing their seedy route across the floor. I wanted to leave the place as quickly as possible, but no sooner had I taken a step than something of great strength came at me from behind, and at the same moment I felt a prick in my neck. My consciousness blacked out before I could hit the floor. The last entry. This is most likely my last entry. I was returned to my cell before I became conscious of what was happening. I was once again tormented by nightmares until I was awakened by footsteps outside the door, mixed with a man's voice. The man was desperately yelling something about not wanting to be eaten alive, making incoherent pleas for mercy. They passed by my cell, and then there were only fragments of echoes. I had already resigned myself to the fact that I would not get out of here alive. The only thing that matters to me now is that I hope this diary will someday fall into the right hands. And maybe what's happening here will one day end, and no one will ever be trapped inside these walls again. I'm going to try to describe one moment that I think will shed some light on what's going on here. As I was being returned to my cell, at some point I must have been dropped. The impact with the floor gave me a split second's recovery, and I had time to look at the place through which I was being dragged. It was a huge hall filled with red phosphorescent fog, in the center of which floated a flying saucer glittering with all sorts of lights, almost like the ones shown in sci-fi movies. Around it stood beings exactly like the one with the mannequin arm, trying to dissect me with it. Only these ones weren't wearing military uniforms and other masquerade. They were unclothed, and their appearance resembled huge centipedes. They were bustling about, doing some kind of work unknown to the earthly mind, without making a single sound. And at that very moment, by some previously unavailable levels of subconsciousness, suddenly understood everything. It was as if some divine revelation had appeared in front of me, quickly putting everything in its place. I realized that my hallucinations were not a disease, and that people in general are not prone to these kinds of ailments. All this darkness, madness, schizophrenia, visions are projected into our brains by these aliens. Their saucer is acting as a powerful transmitter around the world. If you are suddenly interested in them, then wherever you are, rest assured, they will get you. Their waves, like an infernal spider, weave around the earth. That's how they control people. And the entire world system of medical psychiatry is in secret collusion with them. They bring people here to feed them to their offspring. The Widdish alien larvae eat human flesh to grow strong. I'm here as food too. Apparently, some facet of the brain's sense of self-preservation breaks down when you realize you're destined to become someone's lunch. Right now, I don't care at all. My fear has evaporated, and I take it for granted. Outside the door, I hear a woman screaming. They'll be coming for me soon. I have to hide this journal before it's too late. The last thing I want to write about is that no matter what state I'm in, I couldn't have killed my own mother. I had always suspected that an outsider had done it by subjugating my mind. My suspicions have finally been confirmed, and now my conscience is clear. Farewell. After word from the author, I was given this diary by my fellow stalkers who wished to remain anonymous in this story. According to them, the diary was found by them in one of the abandoned bomb shelters located in the northern part of Russia. To the material they attached the exact coordinates of this place. I looked for information on the internet and found only a couple of notes that this object was built in the late 80s and immediately abandoned for unknown reasons. Without thinking long, I decided to do my own investigation. Tomorrow morning, I'm going there. Can't even imagine what might be waiting for me in this place. But my unquenchable explorer spirit overrides any common sense, and I'm already packing for the road. I have asked my wife to give this text to the general public in case I don't return. If you're reading this now, that's what happened. The world is full of mysteries and secrets, most of which are not destined to come to light. I believe in fate. And if something happened to me out there, it means that mankind is not yet ready for this kind of discovery. I apologize to all my family and friends for leaving you forever. Believe me, it's the right thing to do. Sincerely yours,